I couldn't sit in a chair for long periods of time without pain. And it wasn't terrible pain. You know, it was like maybe like a 2 or a 3 out of 10 most days. But sometimes if I bent down and tied up my shoelace, I could like twinge it. And then for like 2 days, it would be at like a 4 or 5. Just annoying, and especially annoying if you're in your mid-20s and this is something going on already. And so, yeah, I did all of this physio and none of it went away. And so I'm just saying, well, I guess I'm going to have to just live with it. And because I noticed that sitting in a chair for long periods of time, kind of hunched over, was not working, I invested in a $6,500 dentist-style chair, which like would lean back into the full like reclined position, like feet could get above your head.
Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Nicole Lamberson, and I do coaching at Taper Clinic with Dr. Josef. And I asked him to come on today to do like a fun kind of Q&A just to get to know him better and kind of pick his brain for his thoughts and opinions on certain questions. So thanks for being a good sport, Josef.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Happy to.
Okay. So first question, you go to a party, people come up to you and they're like, hey, what do you do for a living? How do you explain it?
Oh man. It's interesting. This answer changed a lot over time. And when I was a psychiatrist, I had some really uncomfortable conversations with people. Like when I'd be like, I'm a psychiatrist. I remember being at a party in the bathroom once and someone asked you, what do you do? I'm a psychiatrist. And then they told me, they were just like, recently, you know, I was hospitalized in the psychiatric hospital. I tried to take my life. And he started crying. And like, I had to give him like a hug, like, and we were just like lining up to go to the bathroom. And I remember after, and then my wife was in front of me and she came out and I'm like hugging this guy who's crying. And she's like, Josef, yeah, like, what's happening? Yeah. And I'm just like, he was telling me something about like going to the hospital. I'm like, hey, I got to go. And then I went into the bathroom and then she was like comforting him as well. And it was just like, it was like a full on experience that we were not expecting, like at a party that we were at. And so I started telling people that I was in pharmaceuticals, you know, for a while. Like when someone would ask me, I would just like lie. Cause I think at that time I was transitioning and I was doing some stuff in industry. So I was just like, oh, you know, I'm in drug development, you know, is what I would say. Just nice, neutral. That's fine. Yeah. But now when people ask me what I do, I tell them, I go, I help people come off psychiatric drugs is essentially it. And then usually they go, oh, what's that? And I go, well, have you heard of things like Xanax and Klonopin? We help people come off them slowly. And it's very short, it's very to the point, and people are usually like, okay, cool, I'm glad someone is doing that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do most people though, or like what percentage? Because I do the same thing. I figure it part of my advocacy is when people ask me that, I'm just going to say, because it's a chance to educate like in a quick way. And like, probably 50 to 75% will lean in and be like, well, I take, you know, and then they tell me Lexapro or whatever it is. Like, do you get that from most people? I do sometimes, or they're like, oh, my sister takes this, or I take this. And then I'm in the uncomfortable situation where I'm just like, I don't really know what to say, because I also don't, you know, even though like, I mean, my heart, you know, beats for this stuff and I do it. I'm also knowing that not everyone is ready to be like, hey, are you ready to take, what is it, like the red pill or whatever it is, and to like unexpectedly here at this playground while our children are playing together, you know, realize why long-term psychiatric medication use is terrible and you need to sign up for my program right now. No, like I kind of hold back on it unless I really, you know, if someone's really kind of going for it, because I'm not going to bombard someone with that. They'll need to come to it on their own. Yeah. Well, maybe even just telling them that there's
an actual practice of getting people off of meds is like enough to just plant the seed and then they go find out on their own, you know?
Yeah, I think I could say things such as like, you know, sometimes, you know, people get on medications and over time they start to think that they're not really helping them, or they want to feel, you know, they want to feel their emotions without the filter of meds, you know, just like a very like gentle way of just being like, maybe I want to feel my emotions without the filter of meds, or maybe, you know, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I was just curious if you got into it at parties.
Sometimes people actually button up around me, you know, when they're just like, "Oh, you're a psychiatrist," and then I think it's like, that thing is still there. Like even though like I have some therapy background, but I'm not like an analyst, and even though I am really interested in that stuff, like I know I've told you this, Nicole. Like I'm a very like self-oriented person. I'm not like being like, oh, what's happening with this person and their emotions, unless I really switch into that mode. So, but people think you're always analyzing them. So some people just, they pull back and they go, okay.
Yeah. Well, and there's kind of a stigma about psychiatrists too. I think that they're kind of like weird or like not right themselves. Have you ever heard that? Like they go into it to sort of discover what's wrong with their own self.
Yeah, totally. I think everyone, if they're honest with them, ends up doing this kind of work because they have their own things that they're trying to figure out.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So a long time ago, I saw on your social media this picture of you in a reclining desk chair. And I had never seen anything like it before. So I was like at dinner with my dad and I was like, look at his chair. And my dad was like, you know, my father's a physician. And he was like, he's 30 something years old. Like he should not be in a chair like that. Cause I guess my dad recognized it's for like people with really bad backs or something. I thought it was just some cool like thing that you had gotten. And he was like, what happened to his back? So I asked you and you told me, and I thought it was a pretty cool story. So do you want to share like why the chair? And why do you not need the chair anymore now? Yeah.
So this is an interesting story. It starts off in a really common way. You know, I've heard this a million times. I used to do CrossFit and I blew out a disc doing CrossFit. I don't know if you guys know the exercises when you hold like a big medicine ball and you have to go into a full squat and then you throw it like, I don't know, like 3 or 4 meters into the air, like over 10 feet, and it bounces off the wall and then you kind of catch it and you go into a squat, then you bound up and do it. I hurt my back doing a lot of those. And so I had chronic lower back pain and pretty early on. So this was probably about 9 years ago. And it just didn't go away. And for a long time, I was just like, oh, maybe it's in my hip. And I did all of this physio stuff and nothing ever made it go away. And I couldn't sit in a chair for long periods of time without pain. And it wasn't terrible pain. You know, it was like maybe like a 2 or a 3 out of 10 most days. But sometimes if I bent down and tied up my shoelace, I could like twinge it. And then for like 2 days, it would be at like a 4 or 5. Just annoying, and especially annoying if you're in your mid-20s and this is something going on already. And so, I did all of this physio and none of it went away. And so I'm just saying, well, I guess I'm going to have to just live with it. And because I noticed that sitting in a chair for long periods of time, kind of hunched over, was not working, I invested in a $6,500 dentist style chair, which like would lean back into the full like reclined position, like feet could get above your head. You could kind of be just like this. And I still use this chair to this day. I've mounted a massive monitor on it. It's a 44-inch monitor. It's the size of a small TV. And it kind of hangs over my head like this. And I work with my hands up like that on a with a small cutout desk with a magnetic mouse pad and keyboard, so it doesn't like slide off and fall. And so that's how I was working in a zero gravity position with a monitor hanging over my head. And I did that. I still do that actually to this day, but it made a huge difference for my back pain because it took all of the pressure off my back, so I could sit there and I could focus and I could get it done. And then, I mean, the interesting thing about all of this was, despite, going to physio and doing all of this stuff, the back pain went away, and it went away when I changed my diet, which was kind of this other thing that, there's all of these factors that kind of come together and just make me just go, man, the medical establishment is so like off base.
But were you changing your diet to heal your back, or it just coincided and then you were like, holy crap, my back's better?
I was changing my diet to lose weight. So I probably weigh at about 170 pounds now. But back then, like right before I went on a diet, I was probably at maybe a little over 210. So like I was big. I never really showed it, but I was like the heaviest I'd been.
And how tall are you?
I'm about 5'11". Okay. Yeah. And so it was after my daughter was born, and, we were just on the Domino's lifestyle. We were just kind of getting through things, eating Domino's Supreme and pepperoni pizza. Like this was back when I was, still drinking a lot of coffee and nicotine and like eating unhealthy, just standard American diet, just kind of whatever I wanted to, drinking alcohol. And so I was about 210 pounds. I actually think if you go to the earliest videos on this YouTube channel, you are going to see what my face looks like before I lost weight, because that's around about when it started, a little over a year ago.
Josef Witt-Donut back then, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so around that time, the funny thing is, when I started this YouTube channel was right when I was going through all of these changes. Like the Xanax had fallen off probably like maybe 6 months or so before that. The caffeine and the nicotine had dropped off maybe a few months before that, and I'd started a diet. Like everything was kind of snowballing. I was becoming more functional. I had like more time to do things. And so, yeah, I was doing this diet to lose weight, because I'm just like, man, 210 is pretty big. And within like 6 weeks to 2 months or something, my back pain went away. Just poof, and I started noticing that I could get on a flight, like a cross country flight for 5 hours to visit my in-laws in New Jersey, and I wouldn't have any back pain. I used to sit on these stupid, like kind of balls, like, the muscle tension release balls that you might see at the gym. I'd get them and I'd shove them like in my lower lumbar spine previously. And I didn't need to do that anymore. And I really think it was, I did an elimination diet, which is essentially no gluten, no dairy. And then there's like a list of other like things with lectins, which are like beans and peanuts and things like that, which you avoid. So I did an anti-inflammatory elimination diet, and it went away within 2 months. And maybe I'd lost 2 pounds by then. So it really wasn't the weight loss, but it was actually, I think I just lowered the overall amount of inflammation in my body, and somehow it just was less irritating to the nerves. I still have some of that back pain. Like there's a susceptibility there. Like if I do something really, twist myself in some really bad way, like I'll trigger it again, but it's not like it used to be when I would sit in this chair. Like if I would sit like I am now and I would get it. But I still use the chair because the chair is really cool. You can see photos of it, I think, actually on my Instagram, if you want to see it. It's an alt workstation. If anyone's having back pain, I mean, it's the greatest thing I've ever bought, and I love it. But yeah. So I still have the crazy chair though.
So prior to that personal experience though, like, did you believe that diet could have such a profound effect on physiology and like how someone feels, or did you have to have that experience to believe it?
I mean, for me, I think maybe I was getting there. I mean, because there was this whole like process of like learning, hey, these psych drugs aren't that great. And, things in medicine, maybe they're not really that helpful for patients. So I think I was going down that road, but when that happened, it kind of was just like, hey, actually diet is like really important. And I mean, I'd seen so many people who had back surgeries that had been botched or who had ended up on opiates. And I could have easily seen myself going down that path if I had like a second hit, or maybe I'm like, if I wasn't someone who could work from home in like a stupid like dentist chair and I had to like, sit at a desk somewhere else, maybe I would have done something like that. But I went through medicine, and I think like most people who go through medical training, you don't learn about diet, and because no one talks about it, you don't think it's important at all. You think it's not real medicine. And, when I had this experience and, I was at the FDA and in several pharmaceutical companies, I said, well, I've never heard of this because there's no war chest of marketing money, like going out and talking to doctors saying, hey, you should do this for their diet. It's really helpful. And so it's not that it doesn't work. It's that we think it's not important because we don't hear about it, but we just don't hear about it because there's not billions to be made in putting people on healthier diets. Yeah.
Or people don't know what healthier means. Like they don't know what a diet, what diets are the good ones, like all of the guidance from, the American Heart Association and all these other government agencies, like the diet advice is terrible. So it's like people might be trying to help themselves, but they're doing the wrong diet.
Yeah. Like they'll have ideas about, animal fats and proteins and like, oh, if I eat too much meat, it's going to clog my arteries but they'll be, I don't know, doing like a vegan diet and just like pounding gluten. And if gluten's not good for you, then you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah. Or like super low fat, and then they wonder why they're like hungry and miserable, it's stuff like that. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for clearing up the bit about the chair. I thought that was a really cool story and could help somebody else maybe.
I try and make everyone, like if people are open to it when they join the program, I'm like, try an elimination diet. Like if you are someone has any autoimmune problems or you have GI problems, or even if you don't, but like especially if it's GI or autoimmune, like you've got to try an elimination diet. I mean, if you have chronic pain, try an elimination diet. I think it's just a must do for those things.
Yeah. And maybe it doesn't cure everything, but what if it brings something down, like a couple notches? Like it's still relief, Yeah. So, yeah. Do you have a pet peeve thing that like mainstream psychiatrists do or say, or like, the most egregious things your patients tell you that some mainstream psychiatrist told them?
I think the main one is that I don't know. This is like really off the cuff. If I think about things that I really don't enjoy, it's when people tell me that antidepressants can't cause suicidal behavior. I think that's the one that really winds you up. Really winds me up. And I mean, the reason it really winds me up is it's such a lie. It's where my academic research is. It's like when I used to publish in the literature, so I wrote chapters about that. The whole thing is like I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but if you believe that people can have paradoxical reactions to drugs, of course they can. Just like someone who smokes cannabis could become paranoid unexpectedly. Like everyone can have weird reactions to drugs. Obviously, if someone has a weird reaction to a drug while they're already depressed, that's bad. And so to me, it's like really simple, but the whole story about it is like this came out in the early 90s. This was like what David Healy was going on about, and really what he became quite well known for. Like they started using these big epidemiological studies to to kind of throw doubt on the whole thing. And a lot of people still believe that to this day. And it's marketing and it's kind of peer pressure within psychiatry. And you'll say, yeah, you want to be careful. These drugs, they might make people worse. And then a psychiatrist will say, oh, but it's still controversial. That's the thing that I really hate. It's like, oh, people still don't really like know yet. And it's like, they've just, I guess, swallowed the BS from like pharma and all of that. And it's just so dangerous. It's so dangerous to not do clinical interviews with people who are getting worse after being on the drug, and to just be like, oh, it's controversial, like almost as if saying that it's just something that, you know, people who have an axe to grind with psychiatry are just putting out there to kind of pollute the airwaves.
Yeah.
That
but isn't it in the label anyways? Like it says, I mean, I know for children it says, but what about adults that antidepressants can cause suicidal ideation and action, or no?
It's so like the label is it's really, really stupid. And yeah, so it says it increases the risk of suicide in kids under age 21 and so under age 25. But then you wonder, go, well, you know, what happens in people older than that? The truth is, like, a drug can have a paradoxical reaction in anyone. And I think the labeling is misleading because it makes people think that it's a risk in just younger people. But these things are, so I guess what's important to remember is this: the studies are done with a placebo group, and antidepressants actually, I mean, some people may not believe this, but I actually think that they quote unquote work in the short period, because sometimes when you want emotional blunting can actually be helpful. Like if someone's really anxious and they're suicidal and they get the normal drug effect from them and it constricts their emotions, and like they're going to be less suicidal, at least in the short run. And so in an 8-week clinical trial, which is most of them, you're actually probably going to make some people feel less suicidal, right? So there's going to be a positive effect from the drug. But, so they're getting a group, and let's say there's 100 people on the drug and 100 people on placebo. The group's the same. Maybe there would have been 10 suicides in both groups, but because you give the group a drug, one group the drug like this, so there's still 10 suicides here after 8 weeks. You give this group the drug, and now there's 6 suicides, right? And it's like, let's say you prevented 5 people from taking their life because of the drug in that short period of time, but you just you caused one. You caused one because they had a paradoxical reaction. So it's always this kind of this up and down. It's like you can have dual effects with different drugs. And so what the label is about really is it shows that in young people, the drugs cause more suicides than prevent suicides. In middle-aged people, it's neutral. It's a wash. There's the same suicides in both groups, meaning whatever suicides that they prevented in the group on the drug were made up for by drug-induced suicides, right? And so that's why you have the same number in both of them. And then when you get in populations 65 or older, at least in the 8 weeks there, it's actually beneficial. There's more suicides in the untreated group, slightly. Anyway, that's like a way more technical answer, but essentially they cause suicides in everyone, and they've put all this weird like reduced risk in this population language into it, and it's just stupid. It's just like, look out for it in everyone, and just know that it's much more of a big deal in younger people who seem to be more susceptible to it. I mean, that's the bottom line. But some people just think it's not a thing, and that's my pet peeve.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of my pet peeves is when people say like, ban these drugs when we're talking about benzos. I'm sure you've seen that. What do you think about that sentiment? Do you think we should be banning things, or? No,
I don't. I mean, I don't think we should be banning things, but I think people should, I think especially for something like benzos, to get on those drugs, I actually think you should make people sign something. Like, I think it should be like getting on like Accutane for, like, if you're a young girl or like a young lady who gets on Accutane for acne, you need to sign like a document saying that you realize that it's really teratogenic. Like it will deform your fetus if you get pregnant while you're taking it. And I think that's like the level of like warning that people need. They need something that they sign and put into a database before they get on it. But I don't think any of them should be banned.
Yeah. Well, don't you think too, like buprenorphine or some of those opiate agents that they use, they have to have like, you have to like special training to even be able to prescribe it, right?
Yeah. You used to have to go and do a whole... They waived it though. They had that one for a while, but and so I think some special training should be needed, but benzos have their place for short-term use, I think. But I think with a lot of warnings.
Yeah. Okay. What is your favorite taper method, if you have one? And why do you like it the best?
Favorite tapering method. Okay, if you're on really high doses of the medication, my favorite tapering method is usually just like cut and hold with tablets. Like when you're on high amounts, I think that's like the easiest for people because they don't feel it. As soon as you get down to like where you're at the lowest, like maybe the lower doses, like the first kind of therapeutic dose that you might take, like a 0.5 milligram of Xanax, something like that. Moving to liquids is much better. So at that point, I think getting it compounded from a pharmacy can be really good if the pharmacy is good. But if you don't have a good pharmacy, I think the liquid tapering method gives you so much like versatility. Like if you can just like figure out how to do that, your life is really simple. So I mean, I like liquids when you're low and just tablets when you're high. You know,
to be clear, I guess, with your patients, I mean, you're a really collaborative psychiatrist. So if somebody was like, oh, you know what, I just want to do liquid the whole way, like, are you cool with that?
Yeah, I'm totally okay with it. I mean, the way we work and I mean, the way I like to do things, and I also see it a lot in you, Nicole, and pretty much everyone that we work with, is we want the person tapering to take as much ownership of it as possible, and we kind of act as guardrails. And so if you're doing something and you like it and it's working for you and it makes sense and you're comfortable with it, they can do whatever they want, really, as long as it sticks within the parameters and it's not going to be dangerous, in which case we come in and we just say, hey, think twice about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everybody's different. And I think what works for one person doesn't always work for somebody else. And like people know their own bodies really well. So, yeah. On the same token, what do you think about like adjunctive medications in psych drug withdrawal?
Over time, I've become a lot stronger on my stance with this. And like the first 2 years of doing this, I never put anyone on like an adjunctive antidepressant, but I tried to use a lot of different drugs for protracted withdrawal symptoms, like gabapentin, Lyrica, like any drug for neuropathic pain, like diabetes type pain, any drug that was used for migraines, like calcium channel blockers, triptans, like anything that was ever used for any type of neurological pain. I tried it. I made people worse. I made their tapers more complicated. They were really unpredictable. I don't recommend using any adjunct treatments for protracted withdrawal at all. The only thing I've ever had to do sometimes was put some people on morphine or fentanyl. And having seen hundreds of people, I've done that 3 times. And everyone came off because they used it for a little bit. They were happy that they had it. And they're like, oh, there's this thing. But no one, especially after being hurt, wanted to sign up for long-term opiate use because of how bad it was. But it did relieve the pain a little bit. So, I mean, the answer is I don't think people should be on anything to manage protracted withdrawal symptoms that is a pharmaceutical. Like I know some people use cannabis. It's not something I recommend. Yeah, I mean, that's my take on it.
Yeah. Not only because you don't want to make people worse, but like, have you seen success really or not at all? Nothing.
No, and I mean, it's the same problem with just getting on psych meds in the first place. I mean, if we go to something that's daily use, then people are going to get dependent on it. It's going to stop working eventually, and they'll just be deeper into a hole. And sometimes people, if they've got an injured nervous system, like all of the protracted withdrawal people do have, I give them a drug and it makes them substantially worse. Like, even if I'm just like, oh, we'll just try it as a PRN, you know, I push them into like a wave for a week.
I think a lot of people don't understand like telehealth rules and laws. And it's like, well, why can't you help everybody? You know, like, what are the barriers for you just helping people in all states of the US? Like, why can't you do that? And what do things look like with regulations on telehealth?
Yeah. So a lot of the regulations are pre-COVID, which means they're not set up for a virtual world. And I think some of that may be changing. For me to work in your state, I need to lease an office with a locked door. So to think about that. So that's thousands of dollars in an office, which I don't go to, but which I essentially hold to have an office there so I can prescribe controlled substances. And then I spend, I guess, thousands of dollars every like 2 to 3 years on licensure and things like that and insurance. And so for me to have an office in a place, at least now, I need to have enough patients there. And so many people will notice that we've moved towards California, Texas, and New York. We're going to add Florida and we're going to try and add New Jersey. But as things kind of change, we're constantly looking at where we're able to not lose money on the leasing of these properties for it to be legal. Yeah. So, I mean, that's what it takes for me to work in the state. The other thing is, with the current laws, which are suspended at the moment, I also need to see someone in person if I'm prescribing controlled substances. So everyone that I work with knows that if the COVID era things end, they'll need to travel to Utah to see me. And that
just
could be
once or once a year.
Well, just like for a lot of states, it's once. Some other states, they want it to be done like every 2 years or something like that.
Oh my God.
A lot of tapers are done. Yeah.
Healthcare in America. So it's like, it's not even uniform from one state to the next. So you're having to keep up with all these regulations in all these different places as well.
Yeah, and then not to mention that, like, depending on different pharmacies, I mean, Walgreens have their own like company policies. Like, have you seen your doctor in the last year? So even at the pharmacy level, they have policies, and all of this came after the opiate epidemic. So this is also like, I wish I could work everywhere, but sometimes it's like having just some states where you can be really solid on the laws and the regulations is just easier for operations, because I don't want to trip into a regulation or do something illegal because I'm looking at too many different places.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, we just even recently encountered in New York you were trying to prescribe a benzo, and the pharmacy said, we want a paper, like handwritten prescription. Yeah.
Yeah. New York has their own specific pads, and we were getting around it because we had registered our electronic prescribing system, but then the system was down and we needed the pads. It's just it's a lot
of barriers, I think, that people don't realize when you're doing this work. You know, would life be like way easier if you just took benzos out of the mix?
Yeah. I mean, I would probably save, tens of thousands of dollars not leasing buildings that I didn't need, offices I didn't need because I have to have a registered address for benzo prescribing.
Yeah. But you're not going to do that because your benzo patients need you. Yeah.
Yeah. Never. Yeah. Absolutely never. No, we're not going to do that.
Okay. Well, thanks for clearing that up. While we're talking about telehealth, I wonder what your thoughts are on all of these telehealth places just cropping up that you can get like pretty much anything you want. You just gotta, sign up, and because I guess the way they get around it, right, is they hire a ton of doctors in all the different states of the US who have a license there. And that's how you get assigned when you go to this big company, you know?
I think they are like total. I mean, I think they're probably the worst thing to ever happen to mental health. And I mean, I'm talking about hims and hers, the groups that advertise on Facebook, like same day script, you know, sent to your pharmacy. And I think the process for that is, you know, you sign up online, you fill out all these kind of questionnaires about your mood, and then a doctor or a mid-level provider pops on, reviews the questionnaires and just says, okay, you know, you've got depression, just get this. They're like a worse version of seeing like a busy family medicine doctor. Like the person is not invested in understanding you or your problems at all. You're probably never going to see the same person again. And they're just kind of just profiting off the fact that like nowadays it's just all about encounters and just churning people through rather than actually helping them. And they're awful. I mean, I've spoken to people on my channel, not for the antidepressants, but someone who did this to get finasteride for male pattern hair loss, who ended up with post-finasteride syndrome and like just had no idea what he was signing up for. And so, yeah, I just think, I think they're just like the worst manifestation of a broken mental health care system, you know, especially when they're dishing out like Zoloft.
Yeah. And you know, people aren't getting the informed consent they deserve in that setting, you know? Yeah.
No way. No, it's and, or it's, you know, like they have, it's like on their website and they're just like, this is what Zoloft does. And if you go through all of it, it could make people suicidal, but there's nothing in there on PSSD or protracted withdrawal or all the things that actually ruin someone's life. That's not their fault though. I mean, that's more of the FDA's fault for not putting that in the labels yet, but they're just, I mean, they're awful.
So why a YouTube channel? Like you could have just quietly helped people behind the scenes and, you know, had your practice. And I feel like a lot of psychiatrists, even the ones who notice the harm, are quiet until they get to be like retired when it's nice and convenient for them to speak up, you know? Why did you want to be on YouTube and be so public about the work you do?
It's probably, I don't know. Yeah, maybe a personality thing. I felt like after 10 years of having to pretend that everything was like, okay, like going through training, just being like, this is crazy. Like everything we're doing here just really seems like wrong. And then being at the FDA and kind of having to be like that as well. And then also being in pharma, it was just this thing that was just like building inside of me where I'm just like, I'm living a lie. Like I'm doing things and I'm saying things that are politically good for me to not get in trouble, because I had my fair share of getting in a lot of trouble in residency and having to go to professionalism meetings for arguing with attendings and overall just being a difficult person to work with. And I think when you've got that inside of you, it just builds and builds and builds. And then eventually you're just like, I don't want to not be like practicing in an authentic way anymore. And so I think there's that driver. Some of it's also personality wise. Like I noticed that I think just as someone I'm, you know, I feel like I'm always talking to you about this, Nicole. It's like, I don't actually think I'm someone that's as affected as peer pressure. And I'm not saying that like, oh, you know, I'm so like, you know, independent. Like I actually just think some people are less, like I always think that it's been harder for me to kind of almost be more worried and care about like other people and and kind of their perspectives on things. I really am, I think in my bones, someone that is kind of in my own mind and not so aware of this is what this person thinks and that person thinks. And so I think there can be a lot of peer pressure for a lot of doctors if you are very much more other oriented to be like, oh my God, you know, people are going to really think badly about me if I do this. I understand that intellectually, but I do not think I feel the same level of fear about it. And I know this because my wife's a psychiatrist and she's also nervous about these things, but I just noticed that things tend to make me a little less nervous than others. And so I don't think I had as much of a problem putting myself out there, just personality wise. And I also wanted to build something, like after, you know, working for pharma and just feeling like not really satisfied that I was making something that was really useful. Like I knew there were a lot of other great resources out there, like the Inner Compass stuff, Benzo, like the Ashton Manual. And the idea came to my mind, like, you know, what if we could just, you know, just do a video version of all of those great resources and like kind of bring people on. And it started there. And then I had my first interview with a guy called Carlton who talked about PSSD. And I think it was like one of our most popular videos. And then it really quickly transformed into being a place where we could collect stories from people who had been hurt. And I mean, that's by far the best performing content because I think people feel so alone in these experiences. And so now I'm kind of just going with that. Like I do educational content on tapering, but most of it is about like, hey, look, you know, look at the similarities in these stories. Look how real this stuff is that isn't anywhere. And I've just enjoyed, I've enjoyed being able to put that in a place where, like, if you get hurt by one of these drug injuries and you're trying to like explain it to your spouse or your parent, you know, they could watch like 10 other interviews of people with similar symptoms and just know you're not crazy. And so,
yeah, and your channel's taken off too. Yeah. You know, you're doing really well in a quick period of time. So
yeah,
it's a little plug, like and subscribe, right?
Yeah. Thanks, Nicole. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So on that note, do you read the comments? Does anybody ever say anything that upsets you or?
People say things that upset me all the time. Gosh. Yeah. I don't know.
Mine's people say like, does she know her hair looks like that? You know, like stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, come on, you know, but what about you? Are you in the comments or not really?
I hate to say this because I know people leave comments in there for me. Yeah. It's actually hard for me to be in the comments sometimes because even though I think a lot of people enjoy it, sometimes like I'll see something and I'll just get irritated. I'm just like, that asshole, you know,
yeah,
completely missing it. And it pulls me away from my focus. And, you know, when I'm running this clinic at the moment, like I need to just be 100% there for the patients and for the staff. And if I'm in the comments, then I feel like it distracts me from that. So I think the places where I interact with people the most is occasionally I put out videos where I'm just saying, hey, tell me what questions you want. Like, what do you want to see more on the channel? So when I really go to the comment section, it's after like a video where I'm asking for feedback of like, what do you guys want to see more of? But I mean, I still go in there sometimes. Like if we like, you know, the video with like Mark Horowitz was a really popular one recently. I'll go and have a look at what people are saying in there just to see what's resonating with them. Yeah.
Yeah. The comments section is, you know, it's a mixture. I wrote one time an article for Kevin MD and a couple times. And every time I wrote, this same doctor would come on and say, thank you so much for this anecdote, you know, that means nothing. And I just like, it made me so angry, you know, so like, I need to stop doing that sometimes, you know, you just have to keep perspective. It's like, you know, for as many people that are pissing you off, like you're helping so many people as well.
I tell it to myself, but man, it still pisses me off when I read it. You know? Yeah.
All right. So one final fun one to close. Do you have a celebrity doppelganger?
I think so. Yeah. I've been told in the past that I look like Adam Driver, the guy from Star Wars is one that I've heard, you know, when I had longer hair. And I've also heard sometimes that I look like Keanu Reeves. That's the other one that people have said. My sister says I look like Andy Samberg because I think I have like a really like big mouth when I smile and like the big nose as well. So, and so I don't know, Nicole. What do you think? Those are the ones I've heard. Is anyone else there?
I didn't even think about it until I was in the comment section, guilty as charged, and somebody said, "This guy looks like a hotter version of Kylo Ren."
Oh, that's very nice. Yeah.
Which one's Kylo Ren? That's like the character, right?
Yeah, that's Adam Driver. That's the I haven't seen like the new Star Wars, but he's like the bad guy in Star Wars. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. I get Reese Witherspoon all the time.
I could see Reese Witherspoon. Yeah.
Which is very flattering, but maybe like her, ugly stepsister or something. But
no. You're right up there with her. Yeah.
All right. Well, I've had fun. Thanks for answering these questions. Maybe we can do it again. I'll think of 10 more, as we work together and as we keep doing this work, and we'll just keep getting to know you better, Josef.
Perfect.
Okay.
This will be one of the videos that I look at the comments for. So what do you want Nicole to ask me? What do you want to find out about me? Drop it in the comments below, and she'll have a look, and we'll do this again.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
Cool. Thanks.